Okay, our next graph's a little bit more complicated. It says, hey, draw the graph of y equals 2 sine negative pi over 2x using key points. Clearly state the amplitude and the period. Use example 6 on page 406 for help if needed. Okay. Well, we can look at this. We can see that that's a 2. So our amplitude, right? Our amplitude, if we look at this, our amplitude is given by the magnitude of that coefficient, which is just 2. Okay. Our period is going to be 2 pi divided by the magnitude of that coefficient, which is 2 pi divided by pi over 2, which is equal to 4. This is a sine function, so I know at the beginning of my period and at the end of my period, I'm 0. At the beginning of my period, at the end of my period, I'm 0. All right? Halfway through, I'm also at 0. Okay? Next, this negative tells me I've reflected the x-axis, or the y-axis, excuse me. I know that I have a reflection in the y-axis. Okay? And when I'm told to use key points, I can think of little pieces that can help me graph it. So I can say, as an example, if x is equal to 1, I have 2 sine of negative pi over 2. Well, 2 sine of negative pi over 2 is 2 times negative 1, which means that when x equals 1, my function is equal to negative 2. Well, now I know what my graph's doing, right? So I'm going to halfway between here a minimum, halfway between there a maximum, halfway between at 5 a minimum, halfway between at 7 a maximum, halfway between at 9 a minimum. Notice that my axis is already labeled 2, negative 2, right? And I can come over here and play connect the dots to get the basic shape of my graph. Okay, over here, notice this has a pi in here, so we know we're working in radians, not in degrees. And notice that this says the second try if you need it, so if you messed up this graph, just redraw it, try it again. Okay, so in the space below, we know that this is the graph of y equals 2 sine negative pi over 2 times x. Okay. Any additional comments to help you understand the creating of the graph include the domain and the range. Okay. Our domain is the x values, and it's x values such that x can be any real number. Okay. And our range, y values such that y is between negative 2 and 2 inclusive. Okay. We know that we want to use key points to graph, right? What that means is that we're looking for our maximums, our minimums, and our intercepts. Right? So, for example, for this one, I know that the sine of negative pi over 2 is equal to negative 1, so therefore, if x equals 1, y equals negative 2. Right? And that can help me with drawing the graph. Very, very important that we can understand that process.